Hello and welcome to a special edition of CFMEU News focusing on Rio Tinto. The CFMEU joined unions around the world for a global day of action against Rio Tinto in October to highlight the anti-union, anti-worker practices of the mining multinational. General Secretary Andrew Vickers said Rio Tinto had a shocking record on environmental destruction, labour rights, casualisation and work safety.
Concerns about the way that Rio Tinto really acts and behaves in the workplaces, in the communities, in the countries in which they operate. Their disrespect for, in fact, almost open hatred of organised labour, the trade union movement. Their disregard for the Indigenous peoples in many of the communities and countries in which they operate. What is a pretty appalling occupational health and safety record, both in operations which they manage completely and in which they have very significant ownership and indeed control.
The CFMEU launched a report on the Day of Action looking at Rio Tinto's direct engagement strategy. Report author Professor Bradon Ellem joins us in the studio. Welcome, Professor.
Hi, Daniela, thanks.
In this report, you expose Rio Tinto's anti-union strategy. Can you tell us about the company's attitude towards unions?
Well, at first sight, the attitude's rather surprising. They're on the record as saying that union membership's a private matter, quote, of no concern to us. So we've got to look at what they do as much as what they say. And what they do is, over the last generation or so, have spent millions of dollars in court cases, tribunal cases, and in their own internal arrangements to, shall we say, encourage the workforce away from unions, because that's what direct engagement is. That's where the source of direct engagement really is, in this anti-unionism in the company.
So what exactly is direct engagement?
It purports to be a one-on-one relationship between the company and the workforce. But what that really means is control of the workforce by the management and individual contracting. So that's where we come back to the anti-union side of it, because an essential corollary of this so-called direct engagement, which sounds great at first blush, but the logical corollary of it is to have non-union, preferably from the company's point of view, individual contracts between the employer and the employee, removing any collective voice and removing any unionism from the operation of the company. And
when did Rio Tinto start using this strategy?
It goes back a long way. It actually goes back further than people realise, back to the 1980s. I mean, a sophisticated company like Rio doesn't do things lightly. They began planning it in the 1980s. They introduced it in the very early 1990s in New Zealand, where the labour law of the day facilitated them doing that. And then through the mid-90s it flowed into Australian mining operations, mostly in metalliferous mining, from Queensland right across to Western Australia.
And what has this meant for Rio Tinto workers?
At first sight, the direct engagement strategies can sometimes look attractive, because in high wage companies, as in the mining industry, wages will often be increased at first. But what happens over time is that workers lose any control over their work. That's the critical thing in an industry like mining. The workers become entirely subordinated to the management directives and to management strategy. And something very important needs to be said about this. The rhetoric of direct engagement, and much of Rio's rhetoric overall about their HR practices, is all around individualisation, about this individual arrangement and relationships. But I think what really happens is that workers are being subordinated to the company. They're being asked to walk away from one other commitment to their union, to each other, and sometimes even to their families, and to subordinate their interests to the interests of the company. And they lose any capacity, as they had under collective agreements and as they still do in other industries through their union agreements, to exercise any control over their work arrangements as a group.
And what's it meant for the mining industry and the broader community more generally?
Well, it really has seen the wholesale deunionisation of the mining industry almost entirely in the metalliferous industry. As many members of the CFMEU will know, the union's been relatively successful in holding the line against Rio in the coal industry, but nonetheless it's been very strikingly successful in terms of deunionisation. It's also been successful because it's been copied by other companies, and beyond mining, it's been a feature of industrial relations in the airline industry, the banking industry, the finance industry. And the final thing that I'd add, which is I think very important, is that because the company has been very successful in driving legislative change to encourage individual contracts, to reduce what they see as third-party intervention, that means unions and courts, there have been much wider implications for low-wage workers as well, right across the country, and we saw a backlash against that in the Work Choices election of 2007. But nonetheless, the company's capacity to influence policy making remains powerful and means that the influence of these strategies goes far beyond only the very important mining industry.
Thanks for your time, Professor.
Thank you.
And for more information, you can head to the CFMEU website.